later, the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision and said to him, "Do not be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great." But Abram replied, "O sovereign Lord, what good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son? Since you've given me no children, Eliezer of Damascus, a servant in my household, will inherit all my wealth. You have given me no descendants of my own, so one of my servants will be my heir." Then the Lord said to him, "No, your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own who will be your heir." Then the Lord took Abram outside and said to him, "Look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have." And Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith. Then the Lord told him, "I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land as your possession." But Abram replied, "O sovereign Lord, how can I be sure that I will actually possess it?" The Lord told him, "Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon." So Abram presented all these to him and killed them. Then he cut each animal down the middle and laid the halves side by side. He did not, however, cut the birds in half. Some vultures swooped down to eat the carcasses, but Abram chased them away. As the sun was going down, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a terrifying darkness came down over him. Then the Lord said to Abram, "You can be sure that your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land, where they will be oppressed as slaves for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and in the end they will come away with great wealth. As for you, you will die in peace and be buried at a ripe old age. After 4 generations your descendants will return here to this land, for the sins of the Amorites do not yet warrant their destruction." After the sun went down and darkness fell, Abram saw a smoking firepot and a flaming torch pass between the halves of the carcasses. So the Lord made a covenant with Abram that day and said, "I have given this land to your descendants, all the way from the border of Egypt to the great Euphrates River. The land now occupied by the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephates, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites."
Okay, so today we're diving into Genesis 15. Yeah, the covenant between God and Abram. Which is really, I think a story about faith and lineage and promises.
Right.
That have really echoed throughout history, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And I think what is so interesting about this passage in particular is that it starts with, a very human moment.
Yeah.
Abram, even when he's speaking to God, he expresses this really relatable doubt about the promise that God is giving him.
Oh, for sure.
He's kind of fixated on this fact that he doesn't have an heir.
Yeah.
He has no son to kind of carry on his name.
And that says a lot about the importance of lineage back then.
It's huge.
It wasn't just like, oh, here's a family tree. It was your identity.
Right.
It was your legacy.
Exactly.
It was your place in the social order.
Yeah. In so many ancient cultures, having descendants, that was essential to make sure that your name continued, your memory continued.
Totally.
And it was also tied to inheritance.
Of course.
Which wasn't just about, you get my stuff. It was about continuing your family's influence.
Yeah, your story, your place in the world.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow, so when Abram is, questioning God,
yeah,
it's almost like he's saying, this is an amazing promise, but what good is it if I have no one to share it with?
Right, exactly. And so that's what leads to this really powerful image of God telling Abram to go outside and look up at the night sky.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, that's how many descendants you're going to have.
I can't even imagine.
It's an incredible image.
It's too many.
It's supposed to be overwhelming.
It's
this idea of your legacy. It will be as boundless as the universe itself.
Wow. Yeah, you can almost imagine Abram being like, okay, I get it. I was wrong, totally, I'm with you now.
Yeah, and I think, so, we have this incredible promise, and then they go into this covenant ceremony.
Okay.
That, the text describes it in very specific detail.
What kind of details are we talking about?
So they're cutting animals in half. They're arranging them very specifically.
Mm.
And then God appears as this
And it's
incredible, like awe-inspiring presence, like a smoking fire pot, flaming torch passing between these animals.
okay, that sounds pretty intense.
It's a very dramatic scene.
So what would this kind of ceremony, like what would that have meant to Abram? What would it have meant to the people who, witnessed this or heard about it?
I think for them, this was like the most serious binding agreement that you could possibly make.
Wow.
This wasn't just, a promise whispered in the wind. This was like, signing on the dotted line.
Right, right.
And it's interesting. The animals that are chosen, the way that they're cut, all of that would have had very specific cultural and religious significance to the people hearing this story.
So it wasn't just random, it was very
deliberate. And it was supposed to really emphasize the gravity of the oath that was being made.
Yeah, you don't mess around with a flaming torch and a
Exactly.
split animal.
Exactly.
Yeah, so this covenant, I mean, it wasn't just about Abram, though, right? Because it also kind of lays out this path, at least how I understand it, for his descendants.
Right.
This 400 years of oppression, followed by, freedom and this return to the
Yeah,
promised
this is
land.
where I think it starts to get really interesting because it's setting up this much larger narrative that unfolds over generations, So it's not just about Abram in this moment, but this promise that's going to reverberate throughout time.
It's bigger than him.
Exactly. And it's shaping the destiny.
Yeah.
We see it later on with, the stories of his descendants.
Yeah, it's like this divine plan that's way, way bigger than just one
Exactly.
lifetime. Yeah, well,
It's playing the long game.
yeah. And speaking of, this promised land, it's interesting to me, and I don't know if this has ever struck you, but
Yeah.
when God is, laying out the boundaries of this land
Right.
that, will eventually belong to Abram's descendants, he also mentions that the people who are currently living there.
It's not going to end well for them.
Yeah, yeah. And it's kind of a tough thing to, I don't know, to kind of wrap
It
your head
definitely raises
around.
all sorts of questions about, how we understand divine justice, right?
Right.
Like, what does it mean when, and you have to remember, this is a text that's coming out of a very specific time and place.
Totally different than how we
Exactly.
see the world.
So, what does it mean when, one group of people are kind of marked for, inheriting this land, but that also means that another group of people
We're
are
going to be displaced.
exactly.
Right.
It definitely leaves us with a lot to ponder.
A lot to ponder. And I think it's so interesting how in this one passage, we've got, this incredible story about faith, a promise that's as big as, as the night
Vast as the
sky.
cosmos.
Exactly, exactly. And this ancient ritual that really makes it real.
Solidifies it, yeah.
And then this, this other issue of
What does it mean? And I think it's that very complexity that makes it so interesting to unpack because it gives us a glimpse into, how ancient people understood their relationship with God, with the divine, the importance of family, the power of a promise.
Yeah. Wow. That's
pretty powerful.
Amazing. It really is. And I think it kind of leads us to this final thought, right? So if God were to make a promise to you today, but instead of the stars, it was something like the internet, connecting, billions of people now? What would you hope that promise
That's a great question. Yeah.
Right. It's something to think
We'll
about.
have to ponder that one.
Yeah. Too.